First, I want to thank my friend Jason for asking me to do this. It's always an honor and privilege to be able to do anything like this in Alcoholics Anonymous. And when he asked me to do it, I asked him, well, what do you want me to talk on? And he said, well, talk about the steps. Okay. And while thinking about what I was going to do, it's interesting because I've been doing this for a long time. I first got sober in 1988. I'm not from Texas. I was born and raised in Southern California, and it's where I wound up getting sober. And the page that came to mind when I was thinking about doing this is actually page 58, the very beginning of how it works. And there's a part in there where it talks about that I got to let go of my old ideas. The result's going to be nil. Nil doesn't mean zero. Nil means a quantity worth nothing. That if I don't let go of my old ideas, I'll have all my old ideas. I'm not going to get much from them. That I got to let go of these. And so back in the mid 80s, I'm going to say mid 90s, early mid 90s, I was probably 4 or 5 years sober, really active in this work, sponsoring 40 guys. We had started a couple of groups, and my friend on Fridays and Saturdays, we all go to his house and watch movies, do whatever. And sometime we play this game. So a lot of us had started doing a lot of speaking. A lot of the groups around us didn't like us because we were talking about the message of AA right out of the book. And a bunch of us started doing a lot of speaking, and we used to play this game. It's called Stump the Drunk. And basically what it was is we had all these topics in this grab bag. And you reach in, you pull it out, and whatever the topic was, you would have to explain the 12 steps through that topic. And what it really did was help sharpen the saw of my attitudes around the steps. And when I say attitude, I don't mean how I feel. When the book talks about attitude, I think about the aeronautical definition of attitude, that it's your physical position adjacent to the horizon. It's your physical position towards things. And it's amazing because the steps and this process, it got rid of a lot of old ideas of mine about my position towards things. And so what I did was rather than try and cram 22 hours worth of information into 4 hours, I figured I'd talk about the steps through different attitudes. And so what I did here is I just randomly picked some topics. There's Buddhism, physics, nautical, mathematics, medical view, all kinds of different things. So Jason, pick a number between 1 and 4, or 1 and 8.
We'll go for 5.
5. Serenity prayer, right? So what I'm going to attempt to do is explain the steps and hopefully change your position towards the serenity prayer, right? So I guess where I should probably start off talking about is, well, what is the serenity prayer? Serenity prayer, it actually wasn't called the serenity prayer at first. In the I guess in the 40s and 50s, it became known as the AA prayer. But over the decades, AA members have kind of turned into what we now call the serenity prayer. So where did it come from? So the prayer, oddly enough, was found in an obituary. This guy, Jack C., was reading through the newspaper. He came across the short form of the prayer in an obituary, and he liked it a lot. So he took it to Ruth Hawk, who was the General Service Office in New York's secretary at the time. He brought it into her, and he showed it to her. And she really, really liked it. She was really impressed with what it said. and she went and she showed it to a couple guys in the office and talked to Bill about it. And they printed up a whole bunch of cards with this prayer, and they started sending it out in the literature that when they were fulfilling requests. You got to remember, and this is all back in 1941, right? Alcoholics Anonymous meetings really weren't even a thing. And when they sent out the literature to these people who wanted to get information about Alcoholics Anonymous is a book, right? It even tells you that on the title page of the book. Alcoholics Anonymous is the story of how many thousand men and women have recovered from alcoholism. And it actually talks about in the forward of the second edition that the meetings got their name after the book. It's not the other way around. Alcoholics Anonymous is not a meeting. Alcoholics Anonymous is a book. And so they started sending out the Serenity prayer. And it's been really interesting, my experience with this prayer. And so hopefully most people in here know it. God, grant me the serenity, accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I've had a really interesting experience with this prayer. And I went one time to go do this thing at a young people's meeting. And when they said the Serenity prayer, they said, God, grant me the serenity, accept the things I cannot change, you, the courage to change the things that I can, me, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that's the most common view of the Serenity prayer. I'm asking God to give me the serenity to accept the things I can't change. And I can't change me, or I can't change you and what you think of me. The courage to change the things that I can, which is me, and I'm going to change how I view things. And the wisdom to know the difference. But man, it's weird because my experience with the prayer isn't that, right? I think there's a reason why they say the wisdom to know the difference, because there's a huge difference in the two attitudes towards it. So if I'm asking God to grant me serenity, and serenity, I've been granted a lot of serenity. I don't know about you, but if I'm having a really, really bad day, man, I get a lot of serenity out of a bottle of Jack Daniels. Having a problem with a family member, man, some Jose Cuervo will give me some serenity around that. Get fired from my job. I'm really just totally depressed about it. Grab a 12-pack on my way home, and I drink it. I'm totally serene. So I understand getting serenity. But the thing that it talks about is accepting the things I cannot change. To accept, and it's interesting because I've gone to workshops around this prayer, and they talk a lot about acceptance. Accept and acceptance are two totally different things, right? By definition, acceptance is to proceed in the midst of suffering and misfortune without protest. That I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to ignore the situation I'm in. But to accept means to receive, right? I'm asking God to grant me a quiet mind and a loving heart to receive the things I can't change. And the things that I can't change, it's weird because I thought that I couldn't change you. And I need the courage to change the things that I can, which is me, to find out that that's absolutely not true when you look at it from the point of view of the steps. What I cannot change, I can't change me. Because if I could, I wouldn't be in AA. I would just not drink no matter what, do the next right thing, and I wouldn't need you people. But I can't change me. And when you really look at it from the context of the first step, right? Step one is all about admitting that I'm powerless over alcohol and that my life's unmanageable. And I can't change that. I don't have the power to. So when you dive into the first step, it's got its three elements. The first two have to do with the first part of the first step. How am I powerless? And that's broken up into two halves. How am I powerless physically, covered from the doctor's opinion all the way to page 23. And then how am I powerless mentally, covered from pages 23 to page 43. And then after the dash, the second thought around this is the unmanageability of my life, which we talked about in 44 and 45. And I can't change those things. because if I could, I would have already done it. And when you look at being powerless, I cannot control being powerless physically or being powerless mentally. I can't change those things. So how I'm powerless physically, like it talks about in Doctor's Opinion on page XXVIII, Dr. Soakworth talks about what he and these doctors had come to understand. At the very top of the page, it says, we believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics may be the manifestation of an allergy, and that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. That according to Dr. Soakworth, what makes me an alcoholic isn't the trouble I got in, it's that I have this physical allergy. That when I start to drink, I develop this phenomenon of craving, and now I'm no longer the same person that was sitting before you before I took that first drink. Now I'm a guy who has an allergic reaction where I have to drink more, no matter what's going on. And it's interesting to me because that explained a whole lot of my years of drinking, of why I got in the trouble I got in. It wasn't because I'm a bad guy. It's because when I start to drink, my body demands I drink more because I have this abnormal reaction to a common substance. I have an allergy. And according to the American Medical Association, 10% of the population suffers from this genetic disorder they call alcoholism, that my body doesn't metabolize alcohol the same. So I've got three brothers. I'm the only one that caught the genetic bullet of alcoholism. You can trace it back to my great uncle. He died of alcoholism. He was the family secret that nobody talked about. I didn't even know that my grandmother had a brother until I was 8 years sober. And my brothers react totally normal around alcohol. And I don't know why they call them normal. I'll give you, for instance, I flew home, God, it was probably a decade ago now, and we're all going out to this family dinner. I'm standing there with my wife, who's also alcoholic, and my brothers. And my little brother is to my left, and one of my older brothers is to my right. And my little brother says to one of my older brothers, hey, I'm going to go grab a beer. He's going to run over to the bar and grab a beer. Do you want one? And I'm really interested in this answer. I'm just watching. And my older brother stands there for a second. He says, you know what? Why don't we split one? And these two guys, two adult men, split a beer. And they call that normal. I don't relate to that. That's not normal. To me, that's alcohol abuse. To drink a half a beer, that's a waste of ethanol. But that's the way most of the population reacts around alcohol. When they drink it, they don't get this allergic reaction of where they have to drink more and then they have consequences. That's not their experience with it, but that's mine. And I started to realize that the reason why I'm getting in trouble isn't because I'm a bad guy. And it's because when I start to drink, I can't stop, right? That I'm not getting in trouble like my brothers have gotten in trouble around drinking and then they stopped. I don't get in trouble because I drink too much. Every time I got in trouble, it's because I couldn't get enough. I don't know if you can relate to that or not. I cannot get enough alcohol. I'm the guy who so in California, the liquor stores close at 2. I will inventory what I have left at 1:30 and go to make a liquor run because I don't have enough. Because I know how much I need to get to where I need to get to. And that's not normal. That's absolutely not normal. And I cannot change that. If I could have changed it, I would have changed it a long time ago. But coupled with that is this being powerless mentally, that I suffer from these obsessions like it describes on page 30, that I have this persistent disturbing preoccupation with this unreasonable idea of drinking. And after I had consequences, my drinking is no longer reasonable because I know where it takes me. yet I can't think my way out of it. And I developed this really bad habit of drinking when it was absolutely 1000% the worst possible time to pick up a drink. And I pick up a drink. And it talks about on page 30 that I suffer from this insanity, this lack of proportion of the ability to think straight, that I do not think straight around alcohol. And if I could change that, if I could change and be able to think my way through the drink, I would have left AA 33 years ago. I wouldn't be sitting here. But I can't change that. I have this unmanageability in my life that it describes on page 44 and 45. It talks about on page 44, if a mere code of morals, a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. Because I was raised to know the difference between right, wrong, good, bad, truth, lies. I know what a good person is. I know what a bad person is. And I know I'm a bad person. And I'm the kind of guy who, with no heat at all, I'm not talking to a cop, not talking to a significant other, not talking to my parents, and I start to tell a lie for no reason. There's no reason to lie. And I just start lying. And I'm standing in front of people lying, thinking to myself, I am totally lying to you right now while I'm lying. And now I'm starting to get into this lie because I don't know where it's going to go. And I'm kind of interested to figure out where this lie is going to end up. And I can't manage this. I can't manage for any period of time to create a happily sustainable way of living. I can't manage my life. I can try to will these things. I can try to will them all with all my might. But like it says on page 45, that the needed power isn't there, that I don't have the power. And it's not that I'm broken. God damn, I've been told I've been broke. So my drinking, I started drinking at the age of 15. I had a spiritual experience at a drive-in movie theater with the 3 coolest kids in my high school. We drove to a drive-in movie theater after my friend got his driver's license. On our way there, we pimped some Mickey Big Mouth malt liquor. I drank like 3 or 4 of them in a half hour. I weighed about 125 pounds. I got to tell you, I met God that night. I had a spiritual experience with alcohol. Oh my God, it was miraculous. I could not believe how great I felt. And it's amazing to me that I don't have the power in and of myself to bring that about. That feeling, that being okay, that serenity, that quiet mind and that loving heart, that I'm not, my drinking escalated really quickly. By the time I was 17, I was a daily drinker, not going to school, selling drugs, drinking every day, getting in a lot of trouble. My first arrest, my first arrest was breaking and entering weapons charge. I broke into a house and I stole some firearms, but that record was sealed because of my age. But it's interesting because at that time of being 13 years old, that's right about the time I was training to be a Jesuit priest at that time. I was going to go to seminary. Breaking into houses and stealing guns, the two things don't line up very well, right? And going to the therapist and the doctors and seeing all these court-ordered people, they're telling me how broken and messed up I am. And I never agreed with that. I never understood. You know what? I went to your schools. I went to your churches. I'm going to your court-appointed counselors, your correctional facilities. So if I'm broken, then that means there's something broken with all you people because you couldn't fix me. But that's not the problem. And if I could have changed all that myself, I would have already done that. It talks about on page 44, or actually on page 45, that I've got to find a power by which I can live, right? It's like, I'm like this phone, right? These things are miraculous. This changed the face of the earth. My kids will never know what it's like to not have the answer to any question they have. They can Google it on their phone. I could Google right now the mating habits of a manatee, and I can find out how manatees mate, right? I could try and look. I've got a bunch of World Book encyclopedias over here. I could look it up in there. I'm pretty sure I won't find out the mating habits of a manatee. My kids will never know what it's like. And If my phone goes dead, it's not broken. Anytime your battery dies on your phone, do you throw it in the trash and buy a new one because it's broken? No. Its problem is it lacks power. You plug it in, charge it back up, and it's useful again. I am not broken. You can't discard me. What I need is power. I'm not broken. And like it says on page 45, is that lack of power is our dilemma. We got to find a power by which we can live, and it has to be power greater than ourselves, obviously, but where and how we define this power. And it tells me the very next paragraph, well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object, it's maybe to find a power greater than yourself that's going to solve your problem. I'm not broken. All I need is power, and that's it. And I can't do that in and of myself. So when it says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, I can't change me because I would have. But I go to these meetings and I hear people talk about this and they say, you can't change other people. And I really think that that's wrong. That's not true. What I can't change is me, and I can change people. And I know there's some meetings in AA who crucify me for saying that. Oh, you can't change people. Well, why is it that I'm talking about this and you're getting angrier and angrier, and you were totally peaceful when I got here? I'm changing you. You can't tell me that I can't change you. Why is it so many people get mad at me when I talk? Because I'm changing them, right? And it's interesting. I can't change me. So how do I change other people? How does that come about? Well, if I'm powerless over alcohol and my life is unmanageable, that's the problem. And the solution is I got to come to believe in a power greater than myself that's going to restore me to sanity. I got to believe in this power that's going to give me back the ability to think straight around alcohol. If insanity, lack of proportionate ability to think straight, like it says on page 37, is the problem, and getting power and being restored to sanity, that's the solution, then that's what I've got to do. And how I came to believe in a power greater than me, restoring me to sanity, didn't come by me trying to fix my broken relationship with God from the past. It was about, and that's what my counselors were always trying to get me to say. They're always saying, Chris, you keep looking out the window. You need to look in the mirror. Quit looking at what they're doing. Look at what you're doing. And I get to this point in We Agnostics, and it's telling me to stop looking in the mirror and start looking at what you people are doing. How I come to believe in a power greater than myself that's going to restore me to sanity is the same exact way I came to believe in alcohol. Growing up, I saw my dad and my brothers, my friends drinking, and they had a great time. And I came to believe that if I drank alcohol, I too shall have a great time. So I took some action, pimped some Mickey Big Mouth malt liquor, opened them up, and drank them. And I got great results. And I took some more action, pimped some more beer, drank it, got results. Then I figured out a way to forego pimping alcohol, and I got a fake ID. So now I can just buy my own alcohol. And I continue to take action. I continue to get more results from alcohol. It's the exact same thing in AA with its 12 steps, that I have to take the action and get the results. Take the action, get the results. I came to believe in AA by watching these people who have done what I've done, who've been where I've been and worse, and all of them tell me that they're able to live these great lives as a direct result of coming to believe in the power within themselves could restore them to sanity by making a decision to turn their will and lives over to the care of God and then doing these action steps. And straight off of We Agnostics, man, as soon as I come to believe that you guys have something that I don't, I come up with this against this decision to turn my will and my life over to God, which I think is pretty drastic. It's like, why can't I just turn my drinking over to God? Why do I have to turn my will and life? But when you look at the unmanageability, it's not the unmanageability of my drinking, it's the unmanageability of my life because I lack power. So I make this decision that it describes on the bottom of page 62, that from hereafter in this drama of life, God's going to be the director, which means I'm going to ask direction from God. He's the principal, I'm the agent. A principal is the boss, the man in charge. The agent is the guy who acts on behalf of the guy who has power. He's the father, I'm the child, which means I'm going to trust him. And it says that this decision is the concept of the keystone of new and triumphant arts which we pass to freedom. That this is the decision that I'm making, that I'm going to seek direction from the guy in charge that I trust. And as soon as I made that decision, my sponsor gave me a spiral notebook and he had me start writing an inventory, because that's the very first action step. It says right on the bottom, page 63. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first of which is a house cleaning. But I got to remember the point of doing this inventory is to face and get rid of the things that are blocking me from this power. I can't change me. But what it talks about on page 62, right? It talks about God aiding me, giving me help, making it possible, right? That if I'm going to seek direction from the guy in charge that I trust, then that means I'm going to have to ask direction from God in this process. And so I write these inventories around resentment, fear, and sex. And what I'm doing is I'm facing the blocks, right? I look at the three common manifestations of self, resentment, and I look at my grudge list in the first three columns of who I'm angry at, what they did to me, and how it affected me. And I get all that down on paper. And my first inventory I wrote at the age of 23, from that prayerful exercise of asking God to bring to mind everyone I've ever been angry with, because like it says on bottom page 65, nothing counts but thoroughness and honesty. I had 488 names, institutions, principles, and it seems like a lot until I asked my buddy Alton, who's got 1,800, right? And I know a lot of people who get freaked out by those numbers. I had this guy, 60 years old, and he's got like 40 names on his list. I'm like, really? 40 names? That's the only people you've ever been angry with your whole life, right? Is it possible that a guy like you, 60 years old, has only been angry at 1.2 people per year your whole entire life? And by the way, I hear you sharing meetings about how you hate your boss, you hate your coworkers, you hate your kids, you hate your wife, and none of those people are on your list. Ask God to please bring to mind everyone you've ever been angry with and write down whatever comes to mind. And I get to look at the resentment inventory, doesn't start until page 66, and I start to look at the refeelings of all these people that I'm angry with. And I get to write down my grosser handicaps and the natures of my wrongs, not the individual things. I'm looking for grosser handicaps and natures. My faults, blames, and mistakes, not part. And I talk about this a lot. I hear a lot of people say my part. It says that I'm supposed to disregard the other people involved entirely. This isn't about parts. I'm looking for my fault, my blame, my mistake. Because when I start getting into parts, it's a very short trip for me to go from my part. So I had this part, but now that I remember this, I did my part because you did your part. Had you not done your part, I would have done my part. So this is all your fault. I'm not looking for my part. I'm looking for my faults, blames, and mistakes, where I was wrong. And I get all this down on paper. I do the fear inventory just like it's directed. I do the 11-column sex inventory, and now I've faced my blocks. I've written them down, the natures of my wrongs and my grosser handicaps. And from there, I get to admit to God, myself, to another human being, the exact nature of my wrongs, not the individual things that I've done to you. And this is where it's interesting, because I see a lot of people turn the 4-step in AA into their experience, and now they're no longer giving directions about what the book says. They're telling you what they did with it. And what these people do with it is, for the first name, they have 7 pages of shit. And I don't want to do 7 pages worth of stuff across 488 people, and now I hate writing inventory. And it's weird, because when I look at my inventory like it's written in the book, my big resentment is toward my dad. My dad and I, we did not get along. Big refeeling, a big resentment. Patty, 3rd grade. I don't even know why the hell she came up in my inventory, but she came to mind. Turns out, asking God to bring to mind and to look at it and how it affected me, Patty pulled my pants down in 3rd grade, right? On the playground. That's what came up. And I think big resentment, little resentment. But when I look at my fourth column about my faults, my blames, and my mistakes, they're the exact same thing. I wrote the exact same handicaps and nature of my wrongs, and that got rid of this illusion of I got big resentments and little resentments. All I have are these re-feelings driven by my grosser handicaps and the natures of my wrongs. And I admit these to God, myself, to another human being. To admit means to let them in. I've written this whole inventory, but when I share this, I'm really letting this stuff in. I'm admitting it. And I do what the book says, man. I know a lot of people who read it to one person and they kill them and bury them in the backyard because they don't want anybody knowing their fourth step. But like it says, we read it to person or persons. And I've always read to more than one person. On average, I read to 8 people every time I write an inventory, including my wife. And God, man, I've had people stand up in workshops say, you can't read inventory to your wife. Go fuck yourself. I've done it multiple times, so you can't tell me that you can't do that because I've already done it. And why don't you just say, hey, that scares me. Can you walk me through what you did rather than saying that I can't do it because I've already done it, right? And there's lots of reasons why I read to multiple people, because the more people I read it to, the more familiar I am with it, the less power there is around it, the less intimidated I am by it. So when I get to amends, if I read it to one person and that's it, and I go to make amends, this is now the second time I've looked at your information, and I'm nervous. I don't know what I'm doing. But if I've read my inventory to 8 people, and now I'm going out and making these amends, I know this information backwards and forwards. And imagine getting down to sit down with somebody in amends and not being nervous at all, because I know thoroughly what I'm talking about. I'm fully aware of the natures of my wrongs. I know how I've harmed you. That's amazing, right? So I do a 5th step and I read it to all these people. I get to step 6 and 7 and really take a look at it, willing versus ready. It talks about that over and over on page 76. And what the hell is the difference between being willing and being ready? There's a world of difference, right? I always thought the key was willingness. As long as I want to do it, I can do it. That's horseshit, right? So my dad, born and raised in Hawaii, he was an adrenaline junkie, big wave surfing, car racing, just a type A male, just all over the place. And so my dad taught me to surf when I was 6 years old. One winter, we had flown home to visit family, and we go to Sunset Beach. It was probably a good triple overhead that day. I'm about 8 or 9 years old. I've been surfing a few years, and I am totally willing. I am not opposed to in mind it going out there and surfing. I was not ready. Absolutely, 1,000%. I tried to paddle out, and I couldn't even make it out of the paddle channel. Physically, I was not ready. Ready means in fit condition for immediate use. I was not ready. On the other side of that, over the years, I began to big wave surf. Surfed a lot of great places. Surfed Mavericks, surfed all over Oahu. And before my dad died, we got the opportunity to go back to Sunset Beach, about the same size wave, triple overhead. I really didn't want to go that day, kind of opposed to in mind. I wanted to hang out with my cousins, but my dad really wanted to go. So I went with him. And not really, I was opposed to in mind in going, but I was ready. I paddled out with ease, caught several waves, got to hang out with my dad. And it's not about not being opposed to in mind, it's am I ready? So what does that look like when it comes to the 6th and 7th step in what we're talking about? Well, am I ready? Can I answer the questions on the bottom of page 75? So you got to remember on the top page 76, it says if we can answer our satisfaction, then we look at step 6. So if I can't answer the questions on the bottom of page 75, I can't go on. So if you've been told you've done the steps and you don't know what the cement is, you don't know what the cornerstone and the keystone are, I'll be the bad guy. I'll tell you, you've never worked the steps, because you can't go on to step 6 and 7 without knowing The cement is made out of the common parallel, the common solution described on page 75, meetings in this book. You can't go on to the sixth step if you don't know what the cornerstone is described on page 47. That question that I have to answer on, do I now believe or I'm willing to believe there's a power greater than myself? I can't go on to step 6 if I can't answer the question around the keystone they describe on page 62. And it's not your fault if you don't know what those are. It's not even your sponsor's fault that you don't know what those are. But I guarantee you, somewhere in your lineage, you got a guy who doesn't have a sponsor and doesn't know shit about the program of AA. Because like it says on page 29, further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how to recover. And if you can't answer those questions, like it says, if we can answer our satisfaction, then we look at step 6. You can't go on to step 6 if you don't know what the cement is and you don't know what the cornerstone and the keystone are, right? And I was able to answer those because I was ready. I was in fit condition for immediate use. I can answer those questions. I have an inventory of my grosser handicaps. I've read it to people, right? I am ready to ask God my character defects and shortcomings. And it's weird because I always thought that removing my defects, taking all these things I don't like about myself and getting rid of them, to remove them. But by definition, to remove is a defect isn't an excess that needs to be removed. By definition, a defect is a lack creating imperfection. What I need to do is have God add to me, not take away from me. So one of my very first jobs, I was 15 years old. I worked at this place called J&E Pistons. They still today build race pistons for Top Fuel dragsters. I worked in quality control. I had this check sheet, and as these pistons would come across my desk, my job was to look for the defects. And if there was a ring missing, if there was a pin missing, if there was a bearing missing, I'd check off what was missing, send it back to production. They would put what was missing in. I would say it's now complete, and we would ship it out. A defect isn't an excess. A defect is a lack, right? I'm asking God to remove a defect by asking God to give me what I need to be whole. So I say the 7-step prayer. I'm asking God to God, just please take away everything, good and bad, every character defect, good or bad, that keeps me from being useful to him. But the other end of that scale is God's going to have me keep some character defects because they are useful to him, right? I need some of my defects so I don't have to keep looking in the oven saying, is the cake ready? I got to let God cook me in 6 and 7. And now I get to move forward and let God use whatever's good in me, good and bad. Because it's really interesting what I saw in my inventory. There is no beam. This whole beam bullshit of on the beam, off the beam. Even when you look at what it talks about in the 3rd step, I can use patience, generosity, kindness as a weapon just as much as greed and procrastination can be a good thing. I don't know the difference, right? That's why I got to give it all the good and bad. What my past shows me is when I'm being kind and generous and patient with you, you really got to keep an eye on me because I'm really, really, really trying to manipulate you. I'm really trying to get something from you. So I give it all to God, good and bad. And I've completed step 7. I don't have to work on that anymore. You've completed it. You're done. Now I need more action. And I get into steps 8 and 9, right? And this is where I wanted to get to because I do this drastic self-appraisal. I take out my index cards from all these people that I was angry at, and now I look at how I harmed them. And I go out and I start to make amends, not ask forgiveness. And it's weird because making amends is I think about my days in horticulture. My senior year in high school, one of the high school requirements to graduate was you had to take horticulture, which I really like because the horticulture teacher was also the wrestling coach that I wrestled under, and he let us grow a pot in the tool shed. He was totally cool with it. And when you talk about amending, I think about amending soil. So every year in horticulture, you get this 10 by 10 lot of land. It's been grown over all summer. The soil is depleted of all nutrients. So you got to test the soil and see what you've got to add to it to make it to where you can grow for this next scholastic year. And when you add the soil, the water, the fertilizer, and you mix it up, that's called amending soil. You're creating fertile ground to grow. What I'm trying to do in this amends process isn't to get forgiveness from you, to make you okay with me. What I'm trying to do is to mix this back up to where we can get to a point where you and I can begin to grow a relationship from here, period. That's what amends is all about. And I hear these people talking about courage to change the things that I can. I can't change me, but I can change you. Through this process, these tore back relationships that I never thought I could ever heal have been healed through the process of amends and creating fertile ground for our relationship to grow from here. My dad and I had a really bad relationship. And what I saw in inventory is that my dad wasn't a bad dad like I thought he was. Yeah, my dad didn't show up at the game because he had a job and he was trying to provide for our family. He wasn't, it seems because I thought I used to avoid my dad because he always got angry. No, I avoided my dad because I was doing a lot of things that he should be angry about, right? It's not that my dad didn't love me. It's because I did a lot of things that caused my dad to really not want to be around me. And I got to make amends to my dad in the exact process they described. And we got together. I did exactly what the process describes. I told him that I'm an alcoholic. In order for me to stay sober, I got to clean the direction of my past, inventory my life. I saw where I caused you harm. And I told him about how in our relationship, I was always only thinking about me. And I gave him some examples. I told him how I was dishonest and all the times that I stole and I lied. And I gave him examples. I told him about how my self-seeking actions and my own selfish driven agenda of always getting what I wanted really screwed up our relationship. And I got to tell him what I was frightened by. And I told him that I was frightened that I'm the cause that our relationship is in the state that it's in. And that you don't want to talk to me because of my past. And I really wish that I could tell you that afterwards, my dad, who had never said that he loved me, he stood me, hugged me, and we cried. And he said everything was going to be okay. And we went out and threw the football. That didn't fucking happen. My dad was still the same asshole that I had known my whole life. But I changed. And I had fertile ground to grow in. And I became a son to that man. And over the next 5 years, being sober, living the way I was living, I got to show up when I said I was going to show up. I told the truth. I did the things that I said I was going to do. And one day, 5 years sober, I was leaving my mom and dad's house after fixing some tile. And I'm really familiar with my dad's voice. And my dad's dead now, some 27 years, and I wish I could hear it again. But as I was leaving, I said goodbye, and I heard him shouting down the hallway, "Chris!" I'm like, fuck, here it comes. I know in my family, if I hear Mike, Rich, Steve, I know they're calling me, but I'm not really in trouble. They just want to tell me something. But when I hear my name, I know that they're focused on me, and shit's about to hit the fan. I'm like, oh, fuck, what did I do? My dad's going to yell at me about some shit. And I stopped in the hallway, and I turned around, ready to eat crow. And my dad walked up to me, and for the first time in over 30 years, he had never done this. My dad hugged me and said he loved me. And I cried. And then I have these people say, you can't change other people, and you can change yourself. Then what are you talking about in the steps? Because the steps say that I can't change me, but I can change others. And that's been my experience. Through all of these relationships, I went to back to Patty in third grade, who pulled my pants down because I want to make all my amends. Because that's what it says in the last word in 8 and the first few words in step 9. I've got to make direct amends to them all. Patty came up on my list. I found Patty, who I hadn't seen in 20 some odd years. I remember calling her. This is back when there weren't cell phones. I mean, it was still, your phone was plugged into a wall and had push buttons. I had to find her through the yellow page or through the white pages. And I said, hey, Patty, my name's Chris Chun. You probably won't remember me. She says, oh, yeah, I remember you. I'm like, oh, wow, this isn't going to be good. I arranged to meet her to make amends to her and go through the whole process. Hey, Patty, I'm an alcoholic. In order for me to stay sober, I clean the direction of my past, inventory my life. I've seen where it's caused you harm. And I talked about where my thinking about me and what happened that day she pulled my pants down, and the dishonesty and the omissions and commissions of the dishonesty that I had done to her, and my self-seeking agenda of how, man, I really liked her and I just want her to like me, and what I was really frightened of. And I asked her the 3 questions that I was told to ask. What else have I done to you that caused you harm? And she told me a lot of shit that I was unaware of. I didn't know that because of those actions in 3rd grade, she wound up in therapy in her adult life because of that experience. I asked her how it all affected her, and she was able to describe all that to me. It was really weird because I asked her, what can I do to make it right? And out of left field, she says, Chris, this is really, really strange that you're talking to me about this right now. I've been married for 3 years to an alcoholic. I go to Al-Anon. My husband just relapsed again. Will you please talk to him? And I wound up taking him to my home group, and he wound up getting sober. And to this day, I believe he is still sober. And then people tell me you can't change people. Right out of the Serenity prayer. Change the things that change things that cannot change me. The courage to change the things that I can't change you. But that's not what the prayer says. Right? I think where the big piece comes in is the wisdom to know the difference. There's a reason why it says the wisdom to know the difference, because I need wisdom. Because I can't change me. So if I could have changed me, I would have changed myself a long time ago. And I can change others. Because if I couldn't change other people, then why the hell do I need to go out and make amends? Why do I need to try and go out and do this hideous process that turned out to be a miraculous demonstration of God's power? It's because I can't change me. And what I can change is you. I mean, it even talks about on page 132, we've been given the power to help others. Holy shit. My whole life, I've been a pariah on society. I am under no delusion that I should not be sitting in a 5x8 cell trying to look unattractive to my cellmate, right? Because that's where I'm supposed to be. I do not believe in this. Everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be in God's world. Doves and bunnies and rainbows and picnics. Bullshit. I am not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be rotting in a cell. But because of this miraculous experience of God granting me a quiet mind and a loving heart to receive the things that I can't change because I can't change me, the courage to change the people that I've hurt through this process, and God give me the wisdom to know that that's what this prayer means, has been a world-changing attitude adjustment. My position towards the Serenity prayer was changed. So I went 45 minutes. So hopefully you guys who were thinking I was going to go through steps 1 through 12, first 3, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I've got the remainder of these cards, right? And every week I'm going to ask people, pick a number. And from that card, I'm going to try and give you an attitude adjustment, right? Makes sense? There's some good ones. I hope we get the mathematical view. Or Buddhism's an awesome one. Or Masonry, but that's pretty simple. But we'll go through and we'll see what God picks, right? And hopefully I'll be able to erase some of your thoughts about what you're thinking about these steps, right? In their entirety, in a 50,000 foot flyby. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Karen.